Before they were legends of the silver screen, these men were soldiers, sailors, and airmen fighting for something far greater than fame. The golden age of Hollywood hit a battlefield beneath its glamour, one where actors traded scripts for rifles and spotlights for the smoke of war. From Jimmy Stewart soaring through enemy skies to Audie Murphy standing his ground against impossible odds, their courage was no act. These stars didn't just play heroes, they lived it. This is the story of Hollywood's bravest, the real warriors who fought in World War II before becoming icons of film history. Audie Murphy, U.S. Army. Audie Murphy, born in 1925 to a poor Texas farming family, grew up in hardship, dropping out of school at the 5th grade to help feed his siblings. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, he tried to enlist in the Marines and Navy, but was rejected for being too young and underweight. Undeterred, he joined the U.S. Army at 17. Murphy's courage in World War II became the stuff of legend. Fighting in North Africa, Italy, and France, he showed extraordinary bravery that earned him every U.S. combat award for valor, including the Medal of Honor. In January 1945, during the Battle of Holtzwihr, he single-handedly held off an entire German company for over an hour, firing from a burning tank destroyer even after being wounded. His stand saved his unit and became one of the most famous acts of heroism in the war. After returning home, Murphy struggled with insomnia and trauma, what we now call PTSD, but Hollywood came calling. He starred in over 40 films, most notably To Hell and Back, 1955, which dramatized his own war experiences. Despite fame, he remained humble, often using his platform to advocate for veterans. Audie Murphy died in a plane crash in 1971 at just 45, but his courage still defines what true heroism looks like. James Jimmy Stewart. U.S. Army Air Forces, USAAF. Before he became the gentle all-American hero of films like It's a Wonderful Life and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, James Jimmy Stewart was already living out a real-life story of bravery and patriotism. Born in 1908 in Indiana, Pennsylvania, Stewart came from a proud military family. His father had fought in both world wars, so when the call to serve came, he didn't hesitate. In 1941, at the height of his Hollywood fame, Stewart enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Corps. But it wasn't easy. He was initially rejected for being underweight. Determined, he trained, gained weight, and was finally accepted, quickly proving himself as a skilled pilot and leader. He rose to the rank of colonel, commanding bomber squadrons in Europe. Stewart flew 20 combat missions over Nazi-occupied territory, often putting himself in extreme danger while leading his men from the front. Unlike many celebrities who posed for morale tours, Stewart refused publicity during the war. He wanted to be treated like any other soldier. The stress of combat took a toll on him. After the war, he quietly battled nightmares and guilt over the men he lost. Still, he returned to Hollywood with a deeper gravity in his performances. His post-war roles, especially It's a Wonderful Life, carried that raw understanding of courage, loss, and hope. Clark Gable, U.S. Army Air Forces, USAAF. Before the war, Clark Gable was Hollywood royalty, the king of Hollywood, adored for his charm and masculine charisma in classics like Gone with the Wind. Yet, beneath that star power was a man crushed by personal loss and driven by duty. When Gable's beloved wife, actress Carole Lombard, was killed in a 1942 plane crash while returning from a war bond rally, his world shattered. In his grief, Gable enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Forces at age 41, determined to honor her patriotism. Despite being a global superstar, Gable refused special treatment. He went through the same rigorous training as everyone else, earning a commission as a second lieutenant and later becoming a captain. Assigned to the 351st Bomb Group in England, Gable flew 5 combat missions as an observer gunner aboard B-17 Flying Fortresses, filming aerial footage for a propaganda documentary called Combat America. On one mission, his plane was riddled with enemy fire. Bullets tore through the aircraft, narrowly missing his head. Still, he kept filming. His bravery impressed even General Henry Hap Arnold, who ordered Gable to be grounded for safety. Hollywood couldn't afford to lose him. After the war, Gable returned to acting, though those close to him said he was forever changed. The playful sparkle in his eyes dimmed a little, replaced by the quiet dignity of a man who had truly faced war. David Niven, British Army. David Niven's life could have been written as one of his own movies, a blend of wit, danger, and understated heroism. Born in London in 1910, Niven attended the Royal Military College at Sandhurst and was commissioned as a lieutenant in the British Army's Highland Light Infantry. But his restless spirit drew him toward adventure, and by the 1930s he had left the military, moved to Hollywood, and become one of Britain's most elegant exports, starring in films like The Dawn Patrol and Wuthering Heights. When World War II broke out in 1939, Niven didn't hesitate. At the height of his rising fame, he returned home to rejoin the British Army, one of the few actors to do so. He served in the Rifle Brigade and later in the Commandos, elite units that carried out daring raids in Europe. Niven also worked with the Army Film Unit, producing training films and propaganda pieces that lifted morale while secretly taking part in combat operations himself. He was on the Normandy front shortly after D-Day, witnessing the chaos of war firsthand. Though he rarely spoke about it, comrades recalled his courage and composure under fire. After the war, Niven returned to Hollywood with quiet dignity, never exploiting his service for fame. Henry Fonda, U.S. Navy. Henry Fonda was known for his calm strength and quiet moral authority, the kind of man who embodied integrity on screen. But when World War II erupted, that strength wasn't just an act. Born in 1905 in Nebraska, Fonda had already become a major Hollywood name through films like The Grapes of Wrath. Yet, when the United States entered the war, he didn't hesitate. In 1942, Fonda enlisted in the U.S. Navy, leaving behind his movie career at its peak. He began his service as a quartermaster, working aboard destroyers in the Pacific, and later transferred to air combat intelligence duties. He served aboard the USS Curtis, a seaplane tender that supported key operations during the Battle of Midway and beyond. Fonda's role demanded not just bravery, but intelligence, analyzing enemy tactics, and briefing pilots before missions. He earned the Bronze Star for meritorious service and was respected by both officers and enlisted men for his humility and quiet leadership. After the war, Fonda returned to Hollywood a changed man. The gravity he carried in later roles came from lived experience. He had seen war's cost up close, and it shaped his lifelong authenticity. Lee Marvin, U.S. Marine Corps. Long before he became Hollywood's silver-haired tough guy, Lee Marvin was the real deal, a Marine who faced hell on earth. Born in New York in 1924, Marvin was a rebellious youth who found his calling not in school, but in war. When World War II broke out, he enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps, serving with the 4th Marine Division in the Pacific Theater. Marvin fought in some of the bloodiest battles of the war, including Saipan in 1944. During that brutal campaign, he was hit by machine gun fire. One bullet severed his sciatic nerve, another tore through his foot. Most of his unit was wiped out, and Marvin was among the few survivors. His wounds were so severe that he spent over a year in hospitals and was eventually honorably discharged as a private first class, though he'd once been a corporal. He received the Purple Heart for his injuries and carried the scars, both physical and emotional, for the rest of his life. The raw authenticity he brought to roles in The Dirty Dozen and The Big Red One came directly from that wartime experience. Kirk Douglas, U.S. Navy. Before Kirk Douglas became the rugged face of rebellion in Spartacus and one of Hollywood's most dynamic leading men, he was a young man named Isur Danielovich Dembski, the son of poor Jewish immigrants from Belarus, born in New York in 1916. His rise from poverty to stardom was already a testament to determination, but World War II added another chapter of courage to his story. Douglas enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1941, shortly after America entered the war. He served as a communications officer aboard the USS PC-1, 1139, a submarine chaser assigned to patrol and escort duties in the Pacific. His job required vigilance and discipline, ensuring the flow of crucial coded messages during tense operations where a single mistake could cost lives. In 1944, Douglas was honorably discharged after sustaining injuries from an accidental depth charge explosion that damaged his vocal cords, the same deep, gravelly voice that later became one of his trademarks on screen. The discipline, focus, and toughness forged in the Navy shaped his film persona, the intense, proud, and principled fighter who never backed down. Off-screen, he remained humble about his service, often saying that his time in the Navy gave him perspective on what real struggle meant. Glenn Ford, U.S. Naval Reserve. Glenn Ford built his Hollywood image on calm strength and quiet authority, qualities that came from real-life service. Born in 1916 in Quebec, Canada, and raised in California, Ford was already one of Hollywood's rising stars by the early 1940s, known for his grounded, relatable charm in films like So Ends Our Night. When World War II broke out, he didn't hesitate to trade movie sets for military duty. In 1942, Ford enlisted in the U.S. Naval Reserve, serving as a photographic specialist and later a lieutenant. His role wasn't glamorous. He worked in film documentation, training, and public information, but it was essential. He assisted in producing combat footage and morale-boosting materials, bringing the reality of war to Americans back home. Ford's professionalism earned him the respect of senior officers and helped the Navy communicate more effectively with the public. After the war, he returned to Hollywood and quickly re-established himself, starring in Gilda, 1946, opposite Rita Hayworth, the role that made him an icon. Yet, his sense of duty never faded. When the Korean War began, Ford was recalled to active duty and later served again during the Vietnam era, ultimately rising to the rank of captain in the Naval Reserve. Glenn Ford's career spanned over 5 decades, but behind the polished movie star was a disciplined patriot who served quietly, faithfully, and with lasting pride. Charlton Heston, U.S. Army Air Forces, USAAF. Before he became the commanding voice of Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments, Charlton Heston served his country with the same intensity he later brought to the screen. Born John Charles Carter in 1923 in Illinois, Heston was a college student with dreams of acting when World War II changed everything. In 1944, he enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Forces as America fought across 2 continents. Heston trained as an aerial gunner and radio operator, eventually serving with the 77th Bombardment Squadron of the 11th Air Force in the Aleutian Islands, Alaska, a cold, harsh, and often forgotten front of the Pacific War. His crew flew B-25 Mitchell bombers, conducting patrols and missions against Japanese forces in brutal conditions. Heston's responsibilities demanded precision, calm under pressure, and teamwork, qualities that later became hallmarks of his acting career. He was honorably discharged in 1946 as a staff sergeant and returned home with a deeper sense of discipline and leadership. The experience of serving in an isolated, dangerous theater shaped his worldview, giving his later epic performances a quiet authenticity. Decades later, Heston often credited the military with teaching him endurance and duty. Though he became one of Hollywood's most towering figures, he never forgot the young airman who once watched the Arctic sky for enemy planes. His strength, both on screen and off, was forged in the cold winds of the Aleutians. Paul Newman, U.S. Navy. Before Paul Newman became one of Hollywood's most magnetic stars, known for his piercing blue eyes and rebellious charm, he was a young man eager to serve his country. Born in 1925 in Shaker Heights, Ohio, Newman came from a middle-class family and had just begun exploring his passion for acting when World War II interrupted his plans. At 18, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1943. Newman dreamed of becoming a pilot, but fate had other plans. During training, a Navy doctor discovered he was colorblind, disqualifying him from flight school. Instead, Newman became a radio man and gunner on torpedo bombers in the Pacific Theater. He was assigned to the USS Bunker Hill, but a twist of luck saved his life. His crew was grounded the day before the carrier was struck by Japanese kamikazes, killing nearly 400 men. Newman later called that narrow escape one of the defining moments of his life. He continued to serve with dedication, operating from carriers and land bases in the Pacific until the war's end. The discipline, humility, and perspective he gained in the Navy deeply influenced the man he became, not just as an actor, but as a humanitarian. Alec Guinness, Royal Navy. Before Sir Alec Guinness became the wise and dignified Obi-Wan Kenobi, or the Oscar-winning star of The Bridge on the River Kwai, he served quietly but bravely in World War II. Born in London in 1914, Guinness was already building a respected stage career when war engulfed Europe. In 1941, he enlisted in the Royal Navy Volunteer Reserve, determined to do his part. Guinness trained as a naval officer and was assigned to command a landing craft during some of the most dangerous amphibious operations of the war. In 1943, he piloted a landing craft that carried British soldiers to Sicily during the Allied invasion, an operation plagued by rough seas, enemy fire, and chaos. Guinness remained calm under pressure, guiding his men safely. Later, he took part in supplying operations in the Mediterranean, facing constant threats from German aircraft and submarines. He was eventually promoted to lieutenant, known among his crew for his fairness, quiet humor, and sense of duty. After the war, Guinness returned to acting. He rarely spoke about his service, but those who knew him said it shaped his calm strength, the same quiet heroism that made him unforgettable both on and off the screen. Charles Bronson, U.S. Army Air Forces, USAAF. Long before Charles Bronson became the hard-edged face of cinematic justice in Death Wish and The Magnificent Seven, he was a young man who knew real hardship and courage. Born Charles Baczynski in 1921 in the coal mining town of Ehrenfeld, Pennsylvania, he was the 11th of 15 children in a poor Lithuanian immigrant family. As a boy, he worked in the mines after his father's death, an experience that shaped his stoic toughness and empathy for the underdog. In 1943, Bronson was drafted into the U.S. Army Air Forces, serving as an aerial gunner aboard B-29 Superfortresses in the Pacific Theater. Assigned to the 39th Bombardment Group, he flew 25 combat missions over Japan, manning a .50 caliber machine gun amid flak and enemy fire. For his service, he earned the Purple Heart after being wounded in action. The experience left him with a lifelong sense of discipline and quiet resilience. After returning home, he used the GI Bill to study art before turning to acting, channeling his wartime grit into unforgettable screen intensity. Bronson rarely spoke about his service, preferring silence over self-promotion. Eddie Albert, U.S. Navy. Before audiences knew him as the charming, easygoing star of Green Acres and Roman Holiday, Eddie Albert was a real-life hero whose bravery in World War II went far beyond the screen. Born Edward Albert Heimberger in 1906 in Illinois, he was already a successful stage and film actor when war came, but Albert wasn't content to simply entertain from afar. He wanted to serve. In 1942, he joined the U.S. Navy and was assigned as a lieutenant junior grade. His most remarkable moment came during the Battle of Tarawa in November 1943, one of the bloodiest fights in the Pacific. Serving as a landing craft commander, Albert's mission was to deliver Marines onto the heavily defended beaches. But when he saw chaos and casualties mounting under relentless Japanese fire, he made a fateful decision. Ignoring orders to withdraw, Albert turned his craft into a rescue vessel. For hours, he went back and forth through enemy fire, pulling wounded Marines from the water and saving nearly 70 men from drowning or being shot. For his courage, he was awarded the Bronze Star with Combat V for valor. After the war, Albert returned to Hollywood, often portraying kind-hearted, moral men, roles that reflected his real spirit. He later became an outspoken environmentalist and humanitarian. Gene Kelly, U.S. Navy. Gene Kelly danced his way into Hollywood history with Singin' in the Rain, but before he was spinning across sound stages, he was serving his country at sea. Born in 1912 in Pittsburgh, Kelly had already begun making a name for himself as a gifted dancer, choreographer, and actor when the world was plunged into war. Like many stars of his generation, he didn't wait to be drafted. In 1944, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Kelly's artistic talent quickly found a purpose in uniform. He was assigned to the Naval Air Service's photographic section in Washington, D.C., where he worked on creating training and propaganda films that helped educate servicemen and boost morale. While others fought on the front lines, Kelly fought with his creativity, producing visual materials that taught pilots and sailors critical procedures and safety skills. Though his service was stateside, Kelly poured himself into the work, believing entertainment and education were also weapons in wartime. His time in the Navy deepened his patriotism and discipline, qualities that would define his film career after the war. When he returned to Hollywood, Kelly's artistry became even more precise and purposeful. His dazzling choreography and athletic dance style carried a soldier's precision and a storyteller's heart. Art Carney, U.S. Army. Before Art Carney became America's beloved everyman as Ed Norton on The Honeymooners, he was a soldier who carried the scars of real combat. Born in 1918 in Mount Vernon, New York, Carney was already working as a radio comedian and entertainer when World War II broke out. Like many of his generation, he put his rising career on hold to serve his country. Carney was drafted into the U.S. Army and assigned as an infantryman. He fought with the 28th Infantry Division in Europe, one of the units that saw intense action during the Allied push through France and Germany. In 1944, during combat near Saint-Lô, France, Carney was struck in the leg by shrapnel from a German mortar shell. The injury was severe, his right leg was permanently damaged, leaving him with a limp he would carry for the rest of his life. He spent months recovering in military hospitals before being honorably discharged. Though the wound ended his hopes of continuing as a dancer or full-time stage performer, Carney adapted. His resilience and humor became his strengths, and after the war, he transitioned to radio and television comedy. Behind his cheerful on-screen personality was a man who knew pain, endurance, and survival. Mel Brooks, U.S. Army. Before Mel Brooks made the world laugh with The Producers and Young Frankenstein, he was a young soldier fighting to survive one of history's darkest chapters. Born Melvin Kaminsky in 1926 in Brooklyn, New York, Brooks grew up in poverty, but with a sharp wit and a fearless sense of humor, qualities that would one day make him a comedy legend and, earlier, help him endure the chaos of war. At 17, Brooks was drafted into the U.S. Army and served in the 78th Infantry Division as a combat engineer. His job was no small task, clearing mines, building bridges, and ensuring safe passage for Allied troops in Europe. During the Battle of the Bulge, one of the war's fiercest confrontations, Brooks found himself in the thick of German artillery fire. In typical Mel Brooks fashion, he later joked that when the Nazis began blasting propaganda over loudspeakers, he set up his own loudspeaker and blasted back Al Jolson songs, turning defiance into comedy even in war. He finished the war as a corporal and returned home with a new perspective on humanity and absurdity. That experience, the mix of horror and humor, shaped his creative genius. Jason Robards, U.S. Navy. Before Jason Robards became one of America's most respected stage and screen actors, known for his powerful performances in All the President's Men and Long Day's Journey into Night, he was a young sailor caught in one of the deadliest moments of World War II. Born in 1922 in Chicago, Robards came from an acting family, but his path to fame would first pass through the hell of war. After graduating high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1940, serving as a radio man third class aboard the USS Northampton, a heavy cruiser in the Pacific. On December 1, 1942, during the Battle of Tassafaronga, the Northampton was struck by 2 Japanese torpedoes and sank. Robards was thrown into the ocean and spent several hours clinging to debris before being rescued. Many of his shipmates didn't survive. He continued to serve aboard other vessels, including the USS Nashville, which was later hit by a kamikaze attack, another close brush with death. These harrowing experiences deeply affected him, giving him a profound understanding of fragility, courage, and endurance. When he returned home after the war, Robards used the GI Bill to study acting, channeling his wartime memories into the emotional depth that defined his career. Jackie Coogan, U.S. Army Air Forces, USAAF. Jackie Coogan's story is one of transformation from silent film child star to real-life wartime hero. Born in 1914 in Los Angeles, he became one of Hollywood's earliest and most beloved child actors, famously starring opposite Charlie Chaplin in The Kid, 1921. But as he grew older, the fame faded, and by the time World War II began, Coogan was determined to prove himself not as a performer, but as a patriot. In 1941, Coogan enlisted in the U.S. Army and later transferred to the U.S. Army Air Forces, where he trained as a glider pilot, one of the most dangerous roles of the war. Glider pilots flew unarmed, engineless aircraft that silently carried troops and supplies behind enemy lines, often under heavy fire. Coogan served with the 1st Air Commando Group, a specialized unit that operated in the China-Burma-India theater. He flew missions in support of Operation Thursday in 1944, landing British Chindit commandos deep in Japanese-held territory, an incredibly risky operation that helped turn the tide in Burma. After the war, Coogan returned to acting, later charming new generations as Uncle Fester on The Addams Family. Yet behind his comic grin was a man who had faced real danger with courage and skill. Christopher Lee, Royal Air Force, Special Operations Executive. Before Christopher Lee terrified audiences as Dracula and commanded the screen as Saruman, he lived a real-life adventure more thrilling than any of his films. Born in 1922 in London, Lee came from a proud military family and felt an early pull towards service. When World War II broke out, he joined the Royal Air Force, RAF, but fate had other plans. After suffering a problem with his optic nerve that disqualified him from flying, Lee didn't give up. Instead, he was transferred to RAF Intelligence, where he was attached to the Special Operations Executive, SOE, Britain's secretive unit tasked with espionage, sabotage, and supporting resistance movements across Europe. Lee's exact missions remain shrouded in secrecy. He famously refused to discuss them, saying only, "Let's just say I was in special forces and leave it at that." What is known is that he served in North Africa and Italy, tracking Nazi movements, interrogating war criminals, and witnessing firsthand the horrors of the conflict. By the war's end, Lee had risen to the rank of flight lieutenant, decorated for his intelligence work and bravery under dangerous conditions. After the war, he channeled his experiences into acting, building a career defined by commanding presence and quiet menace. Perhaps it's no surprise that Lee's on-screen villains felt so authentic. He had faced real evil and survived it. War has a way of revealing who people truly are, and for these legendary stars, it stripped away the glamour long before the cameras ever rolled. They weren't just actors playing heroes. They were heroes who became actors. Each man carried scars that never made it to the screen, but shaped every role they played. Which of these legendary actors' wartime service surprised you the most? And do you think their experiences in WW2 shaped the iconic roles they played on screen? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this deep dive eye-opening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because next time, we're peeling back even more untold truths from the golden age of Hollywood. Thanks for watching,